You're listening to There Ought to Be a Law, the Center for Auto Safety podcast with Executive Director Michael Brooks, Chief Engineer Fred Perkins, and hosted by me, Anthony Cimino. For over 50 years, the Center for Auto Safety has worked to make cars safer.
Stretching exercises.
Stretch, everybody. All right, touch your toes. Welcome to August 6th, 2025. Fred's stretching his face. It's very disturbing to me. Welcome to another episode of the Tesla News Hour. Well, we have to. Look, auto safety, Tesla, oil, water, something like that. Let's start off. Last week, a jury found Tesla partially liable for a fatal 2019 crash in Key Largo, Florida, and slapped the company with $253 million in damages. Now, this is unique because Tesla's been taken to court before, and quite a few of them, they settle before it goes to trial, whereas this one went to trial, and it is fascinating on so many levels. So we've talked numerous times on the show about how, we don't really know, was autopilot or full self-driving engaged, or it looks like it was disengaged, and it's really hard. It's been really hard for publicly to get this data of what's going on. But now, thanks to the magic of witchcraft and this trial, we discovered that Tesla went, I'm quoting from an Electric article, the company went as far to actively withhold critical evidence that explained autopilot's performance around the crash. Within about 3 minutes of the crash, the Model S uploaded a collision snapshot video, CAN bus streams, EDR data, etc. to Tesla's servers, the mothership, and received an acknowledgement. The vehicle then deleted its local copy, resulting in Tesla being the only entity having access. Well, just having a software engineering background, I am blown away by the sociopathic behaviors of people who actively wrote this system. It makes no sense except to cover up a crime. That's it.
Yeah, well, we've got a government that's run by criminals who hired a criminal to make sure that criminals wouldn't be prosecuted. So why is this surprising?
I mean, from an engineering point of view, it makes no sense to do this. You'd want, in case of disaster recovery, you'd want as many copies around as possible, unless you realize, we're selling death.
This is just kind of scary. I mean, it's, the auto industry has a long, rich history of trying to hide evidence. I have heard many credible allegations of automakers who, find cars after they've been in a crash and, sending in a fixer to remove data from the vehicle or pieces of the vehicle that might lend credibility to arguments that there's a defect in the vehicle. But this almost goes beyond the pale. Physically designing a system that is in the vehicle that deletes the vehicle's local copy of data and sends that copy to Tesla. Meanwhile, don't forget, that's not all that's going on here. Tesla is then telling police, potentially telling regulators. We didn't find out from the trial how or whether they're lying to NHTSA about this type of data. I would suspect they are, given some of the brazenness with which they've carried this out. But they're telling, attorneys for plaintiffs, courts, that they don't have this data when they do have the data. I mean, there should be more substantial fines, frankly. I mean, the jury found that Tesla was 33% liable in the situation because the driver's action certainly contributed to the crash. But despite that finding, gave Tesla $200 million in punitive damages. They didn't take long to do that either. They reached that verdict very quickly and gave a substantial amount in compensatory damages. So the jury was not happy at all with Tesla in this circumstance. This is really the first major Tesla autopilot case that's reached a jury verdict. And it when you break down all of Tesla's, outright lying and the bad faith in which they conduct their operations legally. The jury heard all of that and they were pissed. I mean, I don't think there's any other way to put it. They thought that Tesla deserved a substantial penalty here. And, Tesla was virtually designing a system to prevent disclosure of crash data in fatal and crashes and in injury crashes and in lots of crashes. I mean, there's a system that detects a crash and deletes the data from your car if you own a Tesla. Whether that's still in place. This crash was 6 years ago. It took 6 years for this justice to happen. And that's a shame in many respects that Tesla's been able to delay this for so long. But part of the reason they were able to delay it is because they were hiding the evidence so well. And there were a lot of motions back and forth between the parties to try to get this evidence. So,
hey, Michael.
Yep.
Can I interrupt you for a second? Some of our listeners may not understand the difference between compensatory and punitive damages. Right. Can you just explain that for a little bit?
So compensatory damages are essentially the damages that the plaintiff alleged occurred due to the event. So the compensatory damages would be the damages that compensate the victim's family or an injured party for the injury they received in the crash. The punitive damages are essentially the jury saying, this is borderline criminal, reckless conduct and should not take place in America. So we're going to send the company a signal. And so they go beyond simply the losses that one party or in the case may have taken and are essentially serve as an additional penalty to the corporation or the individual who committed that reckless conduct.
So this is fascinating. This article on Electric, because it talks about how the local police officer involved said, "Hey, Tesla, do you have any data that we can get access to?" And the Tesla attorney is like, "Yeah, let me tell you exactly what to put in the letter to request this data from us." And the local cops thinking like, they're being helpful. They're being my friend. But no, they were not. The letter was designed to limit what Tesla will expose. And then years and years go by where eventually they had to hire a firmware expert to get physical access to the crashed vehicle to extract data and be like, Tesla, you sons of bitches. You're hiding this stuff. But I want to know, Michael, from an ethical American Bar Association member point of view, was Tesla's lawyer, are they breaking some sort of ethical guidelines?
Depending on what their knowledge was there, if they knew that Tesla was taking this, what they're calling a collision snapshot, all of the data on the crash, off the vehicle, hiding it on Tesla's servers, and then the attorneys are going out saying, "We don't have this." Are they receiving that information from Tesla, and they have no reason to question it, or do they actually know Tesla has a copy? At some point, obviously, they found that out, but it really will. Whether or not those lawyers are subject to sanction is really going to depend on their knowledge of what was going on at Tesla.
Hey, there's something about this I don't understand. Sorry for interrupting, but they stated that they sent a command to the Tesla to delete the data. Yet when the forensic engineer came in, he found the data was still there. That's something I don't understand.
No, he found he went through and he found a reference to a file and the exact location on the remote servers. The file itself was gone, but he saw that there was a log saying, "Hey, we sent this file to this server." So
okay.
In terms of obfuscation, their software engineers are, one, sociopathic assholes, but two, not very good at covering their tracks.
Yeah, well, and now they've designed a way to delete that log entry as well.
Oh,
I'm sure. Yeah.
I mean, it's insane. If you're a Tesla software engineer working on this, go fuck yourself. Or, yeah, that's my message of the day. Don't be a bad person. It's that simple.
Yeah, and I mean, it raises raises kind of another question in line with the title or the name of our podcast. There ought to be a law. Shouldn't there be a law against removing vehicle data remotely without an owner's consent, or removing crash data from a vehicle in order to essentially prevent crash investigators from accessing it.
Well, isn't there, Michael? I think that's called destruction of evidence.
I mean, it's borderline criminal behavior. I mean, I just don't know how the destruction of evidence law work. I mean, does it become evidence at the point it's requested by the authorities, so that if you delete it beforehand? I don't know. I mean, it seems like there should be a little more oversight here to prevent this kind of behavior, particularly as we enter an era where virtually everything in our lives is defined by software. I mean, if my, refrigerator that's connected over the air to the main company, which a lot of refrigerators are now, explodes, and they delete the whatever monitoring system data they have on the refrigerator prior to that, this could go to a lot of different places. And it seems like there needs to be a lot more oversight here legally of these types of, software programs.
Oh, I'm sure the criminals in charge of the federal government will get right on that.
But I imagine it's like all software. When you agree to purchase your Tesla, you don't own the software. You don't own all of the data it's recording. You don't own any of that, right? You just own a license to use it. And I'm sure hidden in that legalese is Tesla saying, we're going to, make discovery really difficult because you have to know exactly the file name and path of where we hid it. Is that what's going on? Because that's what happened in this case.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know. It gives me a really bad feeling thinking that this type of behavior is even remotely allowed. Not just in this context either. I mean, for instance, NHTSA's investigating Tesla on a number of areas, right? And we don't see a lot of or anything that Tesla submits to NHTSA because they're claiming confidentiality for all that. So we have no idea whether over the past 6-7 years on multiple issues that NHTSA's investigated Tesla, we have no idea whether or not what Tesla is submitting to the government is factual or complete. And there's no way to know that. I think in light of this verdict, the investigators at the Office of Defects Investigation at NHTSA should go back and review every investigation and every request for data they've made to Tesla to ensure that they don't see very similar types of behavior in Tesla's responses to those questionnaires. There's a number of situations in which data has been requested from Tesla, in the autopilot and full self-driving. There was a sudden acceleration investigation where they found that, every single driver who claimed sudden acceleration was hitting the gas instead of the brake. This is the kind of verdict and the kind of information that comes out of a trial that raises a lot of questions about the way Tesla's been behaving over the past few years. Obviously, we've been raising those questions on this podcast, but up until now, there's really not a lot of concrete evidence that Tesla was truly violating the law or trying to circumvent the legal system. And now the evidence is out in the open, and it really should make the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, the NTSB, and frankly, every other government agency that's been looking into Tesla for the last decade, go back and check their files and make sure that they've been getting accurate information, because there's clearly a pattern of deception on the part of Tesla.
So Elon's been claiming forever that, hey, these cars are safer than anything. A rocket ship could land in the middle of the road and it won't crash into it. So when the plaintiffs got access to this data, they could see what the Tesla system was seeing, and it could see the car that it crashed into. It identified it as a car. It identified the T junction it was coming up to, and it just decided not to do anything.
Yeah, and I think importantly, Tesla's claim was that the driver had overridden this system in the seconds prior to the crash. However, the data said that autopilot was still fully in control of the vehicle. at the time of the crash. So that was just a clear falsification on Tesla's part to do what? To blame the driver. And that's where all this is going.
See, that's
all of this is intended to prevent Tesla from looking like they have any responsibility in the crash by pulling all that data away so they can just point at the driver.
So Tesla had full access to all this data, yet they went into a court of law and made the argument that the opposite was true.
Yeah, I mean, that was essentially their argument was that autopilot turned off around 2 seconds before the crash and that it was the driver's responsibility at that point. And we've seen a number of other cases where autopilot has suspiciously, or Tesla's claiming that autopilot has been deactivated in seconds before the crash when there's probably not enough time for the human to do anything about it. And that's troubling. I think any case in any circumstance in which Tesla has alleged that should, also be looked at.
So the question is, there have been some criminal trials for Tesla, and Tesla has won, right?
Yeah.
In California, and anyway, where a very similar collision occurred. But we now know that Tesla has a loose relationship with the truth. Does that give, but does double jeopardy protect them? Restrictions against double jeopardy protect them from having to go back and look at that trial data? Or, are they somehow immune from having to have
Do you mean criminal trials?
repercussions?
I mean, when you said criminal trials, I was thinking of people who have been driving Teslas and were prosecuted criminally for an accident where they might have killed someone. I don't think Tesla has.
I thought there was one in California where Tesla exited a highway and ran into a car at a T intersection, and that went to trial.
And the human was prosecuted for that.
Yeah.
That would absolutely be grounds for an appeal, or however they do that after they've already been convicted. I don't know if you'd call it appeal at that point, some kind of habeas petition or something. My legal knowledge doesn't extend that far, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have exculpatory evidence that's coming out years later, I mean, we see this with, murderers on death row who are exonerated by DNA decades later frequently. I mean, that's certainly going to be admissible to help prove that the person was not as responsible as they may have thought they were at the time. However, in many of these circumstances, right, just like this one, the jury here found Tesla 33% liable. I mean, in fact, this verdict in a number of states that don't have the same type of negligence law that they do in Florida could have been different, right? In some states, if the driver's 66%, 67% responsible for the crash, Tesla is off the hook. So, while this case worked in Florida, it wouldn't have worked in a number of other states with different laws. So, it's a wild nation we live in.
I'm betting that there's been a busy week at Tesla's mothership, quote unquote, accidentally deleting evidence. We were just doing a backup and things got deleted. Don't know how that happened. Moving on with more Tesla crap. Tesla, Elon, he's like, hey, we released full self-driving robo-taxis in Austin, just a few blocks area, and it's just not that good, and it's caused to drop people off in the middle of the road and can't make left turns, and it's not very good. But hey, we're releasing it in California, and as I think we mentioned last week, California said, I don't think so, because there's no there. California DMV from Politico. The DMV and another oversight body publicly warned the company against an unauthorized robo-taxi rollout in the San Francisco Bay Area. The term robo-taxi was never used in obtained emails, letters, and meetings invites exchanged between the company and the DMV's autonomous branch over the past year. Please know that Tesla is aware of the various permitting requirements, says one of Tesla's lawyers. We understand that drivered and driverless autonomous rideshare operations will require attaining additional permits from both the DMV and the California Public Utilities Commission. So Elon in public saying, hey, everything's magic. And the lawyers, of course, behind the scene are saying, no, we know it's not magic. He's on ketamine again, and it's all bullshit. Don't listen to him. We're going to have a driver in the car. We're not going to call it driverless. Yeah, it's not a thing. Sound about
While
right?
noting that Elon Musk got a $20 billion paycheck this week
29.
for engaging this 29
Yeah.
for engaging this behavior. So they say crime doesn't pay, but seems to be working out for him.
Well, this is just another level of bullshit. Tesla is, we're still not sure what the robotaxi in Austin is doing it, right? That's where they're deploying in Texas, where Texas doesn't have a lot of laws regulating autonomous vehicles. And so Tesla can, virtually put a ham sandwich on the road there and call it autonomous. But, you can't do that in California because you have to, there are regulations for testing autonomous vehicles, and there's another set of regulations for deploying autonomous vehicles. And, Waymo, Zoox, a number of other companies are making use of those regulations to test and to deploy autonomous vehicles on the roads. Tellingly, Tesla can't even qualify to do any of that. They certainly can't qualify to deploy. They can't qualify to test because, essentially they have to have this driver in the vehicle or some type of safety monitor in the vehicle. In California, they've got a driver in the driver's seat. In Austin, they've got, I think, a guy with a red button in the passenger seat who can stop the vehicle. And on top of all of this, they've got people in remote setups with steering wheels who can apparently take the vehicle over at any time. You really have to ask yourself, is that autonomous? It doesn't seem like it to me. I mean, you've got two drivers for every one of these vehicles. I mean, obviously that can't scale. You're going to need, more drivers than we have now in taxi cabs or in rideshare vehicles. So functionally, what Tesla's doing in California is pretending that it's launching a robotaxi or autonomous vehicle service to pacify investors, but functionally they're just operating a taxi fleet. And it's nonsense, I think, to those of us that follow us. I mean, it's kind of hilarious, but to many people who can't distinguish between, a human operating full self-driving and a Tesla versus what Waymo is doing with nobody in the vehicle, that distinction, is harder, I guess, to grasp for investors and for the general public. And so they think Tesla's, moving its robo operations to California when that couldn't be further from the truth.
Can I go into my gaslight now? Because
you can go. I mean, you get a +1 point for asking politely.
Oh, thank you very much.
Sure.
So I picked Tesla this week, which is unusual. I'm not going with Waymo, but on a different subject. In Texas, they have passed a law saying that as of September 1st, people who are operating autonomous vehicles have to get special permits for those autonomous vehicles. So Tesla announced that they've done the world's first autonomous car delivery directly from their factory to a paying customer in Texas. They use a mid-size, what they call a mid-size SUV, but it's actually the Model Y. I'm not sure why they call it an SUV, except for marketing purposes, because it sure looks like a sedan to me. Anyway, right. This came from their website. They put a video on there showing the transit from the factory to the new owner. And in that video, it shows the Tesla passing other vehicles on the right and encountering hundreds of vehicles. But there's no notice to other vehicles of experimental status, no idea of permission from those other operators exposed to the hazard. They're encountering pedestrians, but again, there's no notice to the pedestrians that this is an unusual vehicle. They're driving on their divided highways, driving on suburban streets, inside of a townhouse development. And it's my understanding that full self-driving or an autonomous version of full self-driving is not developed or not qualified to drive on all of those streets. This is the same issue that actually came up with the court decision in Florida, right? Because there was notice inside the computer that the Tesla was being operated in an area for which it was not qualified, yet it continued to operate. So this may be similar. And at the conclusion of that video, they show the Tesla parking itself in a restricted area where where the curbs are painted red, right? You're not supposed to park there. It's a fire hazard, and that's exactly where the Tesla parked itself. So that was kind of interesting, and to the applause of the new owners and apparently some Tesla employees. So,
Wait, not the Tesla employees that were remote controlling that vehicle from afar, though, right?
Probably not. It's but interesting that it ended up in a place where it shouldn't have been. Texas has passed a law requiring the permits for all self-driving cars, but it starts in September. So Tesla was able to squeak this in under the deadline, I guess. Interestingly, with the Model Y, though, there was almost a concurrent on June 15th of this year. There was a test done which showed that the same Model Y, speeding past the stopped school bus and hitting dummies representing kids that were crossing the street in front of the school bus. This was, and we'll have the link for this up. This was a test done by the Dawn Project, including partners Tesla, Takedown, and Resist Austin. So it suggests that there may have been a bias in the test. We don't know the details of that, but it clearly shows an oncoming Tesla Y using the FSD supervised technology, passing the parked school bus, which had displayed a stop sign with flashing red lights, and the testers observing what the autonomous driving feature would do in an event like this. Quoting from the article, however, instead of slowing down and stopping as the school bus stop sign lit up, the Model Y using FSD supervised sped past, and it eventually hit a dummy model about the height of a kid that was attempting to cross the road. So this is, interesting juxtaposition with Tesla applauding their use of autonomy to deliver the vehicle. I guess this is just all extensive gaslight. So that's my nominee for this week.
It's
good old
pretty good.
Tesla.
Okay. I mean, remember, you're starting off with that +1 there, but then at the end, that kind of, I guess, I mean, that's a little weak. I don't know, Michael, what do you got?
Well, I'm going with Tesla as well, mainly because it's just because of their reaction to the verdict from the jury. Their reaction was that obviously they think the verdict is wrong, but they say that it works to set back automotive safety and jeopardize Tesla's and the entire industry's efforts to develop and implement life-saving technology. Well, look, maybe there are circumstances in which Tesla has, created some life-saving technology, right? I'm sure there are circumstances where autopilot or full self-driving might turn what could have been a crash into an event where the vehicle intervenes and saves someone's life. That's what we're putting into vehicles now, automatic emergency braking and other things. That's, something we certainly support. However, at the same time, you can't claim it's life-saving technology if it's also killing people, right? And we know that that's happening as well. The difference here is that Tesla in this statement is trying to lump themselves in with the rest of the industry. And frankly, Tesla sticks out like a sore thumb here. No other manufacturer is deploying semi-autonomous technology as recklessly as Tesla. The rest of the industry, look at Ford's Blue Cruise, look at GM Super Cruise. They're using, map-based geofencing to make sure that their vehicles aren't operating outside of their operating design domain, aren't operating on rural roads like the road where the crash that resulted in the verdict took place. And they're also using what we think so far looks like effective driver monitoring systems. Tesla didn't really have a great driver monitoring system at all. They had this nag system on the steering wheel that could be easily defeated, and I think can still be easily defeated in some ways. They kind of retrofitted a camera-based driver monitoring system into their vehicles that, you can put a teddy bear in the front seat and fool it. It's not capable of actually monitoring the driver the way that drivers need to be monitored in these situations. And, it's this entire statement from Tesla is, obviously a reaction to the fact that they got caught in this case with their pants down, and now they're running for cover to the industry and it's a question we've asked often here. Why does the industry not speak out against Tesla? Well, I don't know, but Tesla is now running for that cover to try to pretend that this verdict is somehow an anti-safety verdict. I'm here to assure you that it's not. Finding out that companies are hiding crash data, perhaps illegally hiding crash data, and preventing justice from occurring is, not in the best interest of safety in any respect whatsoever. It's a tactic that has been used by automakers for decades, going back to before, probably any of us were born. And it's something that, safety gets better when there's full transparency about the reasons behind deadly crashes. And Tesla is committed to the opposite. And for that, I'm going to give them my gaslight of the week.
That is a powerful ending to that. I don't know. Okay, so Fred chooses Tesla. Michael chooses Tesla. I'm not choosing Tesla. I'm choosing Elon Musk. Quoting from Teslarati for all your Tesla fanboy needs, I guess. After a video of someone playing Grand Theft Auto in their Cybertruck while operating full self-driving was shared on the social media platform X, Musk said this capability would be available in probably 3 to 6 months, depending on regulatory approval in your city and state. No. This is pure bullshit and dangerous. If you do this, you're gonna die. You're playing Russian roulette, not just with your life, but with everybody around you. Yeah. That's my gaslight.
And I like that one because, Elon is kind of adding pending regulatory approval to everything he says now. And in fact, there are no states that would ever regulatorily approve someone playing a video game while they're driving a vehicle, and certainly not in 3 to 6 months. So that is one of the just most out there statements I've seen, even for him.
So I'm gonna change things up in terms of scoring this week. Fred, you didn't win this week. I'm sorry. It's nothing personal. But I'm gonna let you decide who won, Michael or I. He's muted himself. He's cursing. I don't hear him saying words. He's still muted. Why are you muted? Am I the only one who can? Okay.
No, I can't hear.
Okay, no. Great, because Michael was celebrating. I was like, wait, what's going on here? Okay, so Fred, you get to decide who won this week's Gaslight.
Me.
No, that's not.
Because no. The reason it's me is because I went into a different dimension and I referenced an actual test that showed that the claims of safety that are associated with the Tesla are completely unsupportable based upon the physical evidence. So therefore, I am the winner this week. Whereas you guys are just talking about legal mumbo jumbo and stuff that might happen in the future.
Right.
There you go.
6 months.
Anthony's going to write a program that automatically deletes your winning from the podcast.
No, Fred actually won this week because he learns how to score this game. You win. You score it, you win. Well done, Fred Perkins.
I'm taking some lessons from the management of the federal government right now.
Oh,
just boy. If you don't like the data, you just get rid of it.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know you're like, is it more Tesla? It is, but first, if you go to autosafety.org and click on donate, We'll keep talking about Tesla as long as they're dangerous. That's right. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. Do it once. Do it thrice. Thrice? Sure. Anyway, from The Guardian, shareholders accused Musk and his electric vehicle maker of repeatedly overstating the effectiveness of and prospects for their autonomous driving technology, inflating Tesla's financial prospects and stock price. This is a proposed class action lawsuit from Tesla shareholders against Tesla. That's great. I think this is amazing. There are even Tesla shareholders like, wait a second, you're gaslighting us. Wait, has he been lying to us the whole time? Did we buy into a scam? Is this Beanie Babies? I should put all my money into crypto.
Yeah, if you want to see how a giant line of bullshit develops over time, you can go read that complaint because they've tracked it pretty well. But essentially, that's a lawsuit saying, we're as investors, we're being lied to about autonomy by Tesla, and I couldn't agree more.
All right, I'm gonna switch it into a little darker dimension. This is an article that just came out this morning that we glanced at. Are we ready for this? Sure. So first of all, I'm going to quote from thestreet.com, which is a little puff piece on Tesla. And it starts off, and the only part I'm going to quote is saying, thanks to the months of safe testing, Waymo One users in San Francisco get the added privacy of having a truly autonomous riding experience without another human present. Now, I've talked repeatedly on the show. They keep trying to sell, without a human driver, we don't need a human driver. It's private. And they always give the example of someone who's elderly and can't get around. And I'm like, you kind of want somebody to help them get around, like in and out of the vehicle, help with groceries, packages. But unfortunately, this morning in the New York Times, they have an article titled Uber's Festering Sexual Assault Problem. Quoting from it, Uber received a report of sexual assault or sexual misconduct in the United States almost every 8 minutes on average between 2017 and 2022, sealed court records show, a level far more pervasive than what the company has disclosed. So while we were on the show, I was trying to do some math to figure out, is this a all kind of taxi ride hailing service thing, or is this an Uber problem? From the data I could pull up, it looked like in 2016 in New York City cabs, they had roughly, or 2015, they had roughly 146,000 plus taxi rides in New York City that year and 21,000 complaints of sexual harassment. And this consisted of things of saying, hey, I like the way you look and things like that, not assault. And New York City, they put out these massive fines saying, yeah, you do that, that's $1,000, that's points on your license, 30-day suspension of your taxi cab license. Because in New York, to drive a cab, you need a hack license. You need to, it's a job. You need to pay for it. You can't just be saying, hey, I drive for Uber, which it seems a little more lax there. So that 21,000 complaints out of 146 million, sorry, 146 million taxi cab rides, 21,000 complaints. It's roughly 0.0143%. So very low percentage wise, still very horrific when you're talking 21,000 of these complaints. It seems that Uber is at a much higher rate than just the standard.
I mean, Uber does about 11.3 billion rides per year.
Maybe it's not that.
I would expect that the level of creepy assholes doing things to women or possibly men in vehicles is rather steady, regardless of who they're operating for. Although maybe some companies, maybe Lyft screens people better. But if someone doesn't come in with a criminal record of sexual assault in some form, there's really no way to screen creepy, I guess. And a lot of these complaints are creeps, but then some of them are, physical sexual assaults. And so, to me, this is, one of the very few arguments for autonomous vehicles out there, avoiding creepy drivers.
Right. But the Uber stat you said of their drive, the 7.6 billion or the billions of rides, that's globally.
Yeah, it probably is. I'm not sure how much is in America. I'm wondering.
Yeah, I can't figure that one out.
We should probably do this and talk about it once we've had time
to digest it.
I just can't imagine that the people driving for Uber are any more or less inclined to be creeps or worse than people driving for any other company.
Yeah, I'm curious. We got to dig into data there to figure out what's the background check on getting a license.
But I think that the real issue here is that, we're still, if you're a rider in an Uber, you've signed a user agreement that typically will include a forced arbitration clause. So if you are sexually assaulted in an Uber by someone who Uber didn't appropriately check out, you're not going to be able to just take Uber to court for that. You're going to have to go through the paid arbitrator from Uber, who knows what their decision is going to be. There's certainly, I certainly don't want my judge being paid by the company I'm suing. And I think most folks would agree.
Well, and, hearkening back to the New Jersey court case, you can lose your ability to sue Uber if you've ever ordered a bag of potato chips over Uber Eats, at least in New Jersey. I don't think that's a nationwide standard, but, there's legally, you're putting yourself in tremendous jeopardy when you're using Uber by signing and agreeing to the user agreement or the forced arbitration or compulsory arbitration. Right, Michael? You're the lawyer here.
Yeah, they say Uber is saying that they give survivors of these events a choice to mediate, to arbitrate, or to go to open court. They're not providing any evidence of that on a case-by-case basis. I'd be interested to see that. But ultimately, I think that the overarching point of this article in the New York Times is that, these are numbers that we've never seen before. These are incredibly high numbers, and Uber has been actively trying to prevent this information from reaching the public until it was, uncovered in this lawsuit, which sounds very similar to other corporate behaviors we've been discussing today.
So I don't use Uber. I use a different ride-sharing app on my phone, and if the driver deviates from the course that's supposed to take me, I immediately get pinged saying, "Is everything okay? Mm-hmm. We've noticed you're deviated from course. Let us know if you need help." Type thing. Does Uber do that? Do you either of you know?
Noted that Uber does do that. But in one of the cases they cited, the passenger was drunk and passed out in the back seat.
Right.
So the pings went unnoticed. She woke up in a terrible situation.
Horrible.
I mean, I don't understand. If I was running Uber in that insane world where I'm running a company of that scale, I would require, a system kind of like the insurance companies have, where they're monitoring your drives, possibly even with video, so that as a company I have video evidence of what's going on under my watch. Now, that might violate some of the other things that Uber's trying to keep in place, like the status of these drivers as independent contractors, something that they've been really, really, really pressed to preserve that relationship versus them being considered employees. But I guess the camera would add a level of monitoring that might tend to make someone think that they were employees. But, a driver who knows that their behavior is being video recorded and monitored in that way is far less likely to commit that type of behavior. It's not going to eliminate it, but I could certainly see it reducing those numbers significantly. And it's something that Uber could probably rather cheaply and inexpensively implement, but they don't want to because it goes against it would probably threaten their ability to treat these folks as independent contractors. So in the end, it's all about money, right?
Right. All right. So listeners, we'll try and dig more into this issue and bring some more insight on future episodes. So I'm going to jump to a different one before we jump into the Tao. This is Volvo. This is about a Volvo recall. And we've talked about things like this happening where this was a guy, Peter Rothschild, was driving homed on a steep single-lane road in Northern California when suddenly his Volvo started accelerating out of control and his brakes wouldn't respond. And this was because of his car had a recall and they made a fix. I believe it was to the rear camera problem.
Yeah, that was
and
it.
that fix introduced a problem that broke his brakes. We talked about repeatedly how it seems the auto industry hasn't learned the basics of software engineering and regression testing and anything like that because it goes against their bottom line. Thankfully, this guy survived, and he owns a number of Volvos.
Yeah, this is a weird one. We talked about this a couple of weeks ago after we saw the recall and the warning from NHTSA. But you get a little more information here, and it is an odd sort of defect, right? They did a recall repair on a software repair that was supposed to fix a problem with the rear view cameras, and what it basically did was, I suppose, it fixed the rear view camera problem, but it created another separate defect in the regenerative braking system, where if you're coasting down a hill using regenerative braking for at least 1 minute and 40 seconds, you lose all braking functionality without any warning. So it kind of shows you some of the odd things that can pop up in software that, things that we never really saw in the past, right? Traditionally, we don't see a repair to a axle affecting your rear view mirror or, things
Right.
like that. The completely unrelated safety systems in the car are not going to be impacted by repairs to another system. Software defined vehicles change that game enormously, and it is a big reason why companies need to validate these remedies before they put them into the real world.
Fred, what's the over under on these companies validating these things before they put them in the real world?
There's a mathematical impossibility of these companies validating software for all possible combinations of failures in the safety critical systems. It cannot happen. It would take too many universe lifetimes to get that all done. The complexity of the systems and the number of safety critical features that are in software simply make it impossible to check them all. So this is a problem that will never be fixed unless somebody figures out a way to make these control systems work safely with far fewer safety critical functions. And I don't think that's going to happen.
Is there no way to isolate systems, isolating safety systems? For instance, I constantly harp when we talk about these rear view camera recalls interacting with infotainment system bugs, creating safety problems. Is there's no way within the vehicles to, I guess, air gap the regenerative braking module from the rear view camera module to ensure that repairs to one don't affect the other?
Oh, sure. That's just basic software design. And dumbass engineers who configure it so that unrelated systems can interact catastrophically. I was talking about something else in which even behind a firewall that you've put in place, you've got all these different safety systems working with each other, and they all have to work. And if you wanted to validate them, you would have to inject faults into the various software modules and see what happens and then test them on a track. That's just never going to happen. Nobody's got the time and money to do that. Even if they wanted to, it would absorb an infinite amount of money. So these, as I will talk about in the Tao, there's just a real disregard for safety inherent in the self-driving vehicles.
Before we get into the Tao, let's because I'm gonna do a positive spin on your Tao. Your Tao is gonna be on road deaths, right? And we have an article from Jalopnik about how I'll just quote from it. The U.S. is the only developed country in the world where roads have gotten more dangerous in recent years, not less. Finland, for example, just went an entire year without a single road death in the capital of Helsinki. That is amazing. How do they do it? And they've apparently not covered all Helsinki residents in giant piles of foam so so they can bounce like a ping pong ball off of cars. No, they've just done some basic, simple changes that we can do.
Well, we could do if Americans were collectively a little more willing to accept lower speed limits, smarter road designs, public transportation. A lot of the reasons this succeeds in, Helsinki. We've also talked about Norway and other places where they
Hoboken.
Hoboken. Places where they've been able to get through. Lower speed limits is a huge part of it. And, in Europe now, we're seeing required intelligent speed assistance going into vehicles, and things like that. But also obviously, I think the public transportation is far better in most European cities than it is in most places in America. And we're still way behind on road designs. Our infrastructure needs a lot of help. We need a lot of help with protecting bike lanes and preventing interaction of pedestrian vulnerable road users and heavy vehicles that are riding on the roads. We need to separate them. That makes a lot of sense, but it costs a lot of money, and it's hard to get programs through like that when communities have other pressing issues that are sucking up their resources, and when their federal funding is in jeopardy, like transportation and infrastructure federal funding is at the moment. So it's going to be very tough for America to get to where we need to be on safety if there aren't proper funds for upgrading our infrastructure, and if Americans can't accept the fact that they need to leave their house on time and not speed to get to where they're going. Speeding plays a major role in this. And this whole notion that people have a freedom to drive and freedom to speed, despite it being a privilege, needs to be eliminated, and people need to be smarter.
You heard it here first, folks. People need to be smarter. I love it. That's a good solution to this problem. Now, Fred, let's jump into your Tao.
Well, the Tao this week is in honor of or in memory of the atomic bomb attack on Hiroshima.
God, more uplifting.
Yeah, it's cheerful, right? But it's a fact that it happened. And quoting from one source that I looked at, the United States military estimated that around 70,000 people died at Hiroshima. The later independent estimates argued that the actual number was 140,000 dead. In both cases, the majority of the deaths occurred on the day of the bombing itself, with nearly all of them taking place by the end of 1945. There are still people dying from the effects of radiation, but that's not the point I wanted to make. The point I wanted to make is that every 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years, the United States experiences accumulated deaths from traffic that are equal to the deaths associated with the atomic bombing of Hiroshima. Now, if people know one fact about World War II, that's probably it, right? That the atomic bombing ended the war. And it was a horrific war. It was a horrific event. And without regard for whether or not it had to happen, it did happen. My question is, or the thought experiment is, that if we had an atomic bombing every 3 years in the United States that killed that many people, what would we do? What would we do to the source of that atomic bomb, right? It's highly likely that we would marshal all of the nation's resources to defend against those horrific deaths that were occurring due to the atomic bombing. But we have the exact equivalent of that deaths in the lackadaisical approach to highway safety that's been in place in the United States for a long time. As Michael just said, or maybe Anthony, maybe you said it, but this is the only country, the only developed country that is experiencing increased deaths annually from road hazards rather than decreasing deaths. So the trajectory is needed in the right direction. And I think it's appalling that the scale of these deaths isn't motivating government action to defend us against this industry, to defend us against this slaughter that's occurring on the roads. Think of it, folks. This is the equivalent of an atomic bombing every 3 years. We had an attack from a foreign entity on September 11th, 2001, that launched a war that lasted over 20 years, right? The number of people who died in those attacks was horrible, but it was a small fraction of the number that are dying every year, and in fact, every couple of months in the United States from the kind of hazards that we accept. And how do we treat it? We treat, GM's bad decisions with deferred prosecution agreements, right? We argue it down to the point where they pay no fine and they are not prosecuted as criminals for defects in the cars that they built in, knowing full well that they were defective and knowing full well that they were going to cause a large number of deaths in the United States. Tested the same way. We're seeing evidence now that they knew full well they were allowing people to operate dangerously in their vehicles, even though the vehicles themselves knew that they were operating outside of their approved operating regime, that it was hazardous, and people are dying as a result. Yet we let it go. It continues. Noted that the court in Florida probably didn't have authority to, but certainly did not force Tesla to fix the damn problem. So we don't know if there's any fix that's gone into the later releases of the software that are keeping people from dying from known defects in the software. Instead, we find a defensive crouch from the company that just does everything to increase the profits and increase the profitability of the company. So I'm not sure what the solution is in simple terms, but in general, we've got to stop treating people as disposable commodities at the behest of stockholders in companies producing this dangerous industrial machinery. We need to be aware of that. And frankly, we need to do something. I have children. I have people in my family that I love. I suspect many of the people in these companies do also. Why is it that the history in the United States of treating people as disposable commodities is superior to the idea that we can get rid of these deaths that are occurring in huge numbers? Remember, an atomic bombing every 3 or 4 years, is that something we would accept in the United States? I don't think so. But if it's put in terms of a car or a vehicle or an EV or an AV or, something with a technological luster, that becomes perfectly acceptable. So, end of rant for this week. Thank you.
I think we should take over the National Mall, just put a whole bunch of 40-something thousand tombstones on it. Just highlight this, how many people die every year from this. That's an effective form of protest. And then the following week, we'll have the 40,000 people are killed every year by guns do the same thing.
I think we should mandate real intelligent speed assistance, which would be in-car speed enforcement, and get vehicle to vehicle and vehicle to infrastructure communications up and running so that crashes can be prevented before they occur.
All right. That's a good solution as well. But yeah, Fred, if it all happened at once, maybe people would notice. But even then, I look at school shootings. I mean, people now's not the time to talk about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thoughts and prayers instead of action.
Exactly. And that's okay because Aurora is going to start doing driverless semi-truck driving at night. That's right. Aurora's expansion includes growing driverless fleet to 3 trucks and surpassing 20,000 driverless miles at the end of June. Ooh, 20,000 driverless miles of an 18-wheeler coming at you. Aurora notes that the unlocking of nighttime autonomous operations can also improve road safety. This could have been a gaslight. It cited a 2021 Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration report on large truck and bus crashes that noted a disproportionate 37% of fatal crashes involving large trucks occurred at night. This comes despite trucks traveling fewer miles during those hours. Get rid of those humans because they're sleepy.
Yeah, I mean, that's par for the course. Most fatal crashes occur at night, despite, nighttime over the course of the year, I think, being shorter than the daytime. And I think it comes down to poor visibility and, to some extent, the fact that people tend to use substances that impair their driving abilities later in the day. But, ultimately, if you're going to be operating a trucking fleet autonomously, you're going to have to do it at night, as well as during the day. And that's what Aurora's headed towards. I think we've talked about how they had to put a safety driver back in the truck, which of course we are fans of, because it certainly helps keep things a little safer when you're not completely relying on the autonomous computer that's in the vehicle. But this is yet another announcement from an autonomous vehicle company that they're doing something new that's going to have a great outcome and blah 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 blah. So not too much new to see here, although I guess it's notable that Aurora's finally moving into nighttime operations, which proved to be a little more difficult for autonomous vehicles because a lot of the cameras that they use aren't going to work as well at night. And, the challenges at night with human drivers around you who may be in all sorts of states of consciousness are a little tougher.
It's worth reminding people that there is no data, none, zero, zilch, nick, that autonomous vehicles improve highway safety. There is just no data. This is just an aspirational claim. And whenever you see that associated with an announcement of AV capability, it's purely bullshit. There is no data.
Purely bullshit. The name of our other podcast. Now, let's jump into recalls. Who's first up? Ford. Yeah, Ford keeping its winning streak going. 312,000 plus vehicles. The 2025 Lincoln Navigator, 2025 Ford Ranger, Ford Bronco, Ford Expedition, Ford F-150. The electronic brake booster module may enter in a faulted state while driving, resulting in a loss of brake boost until the electronic brake booster module completes a sleep cycle when the vehicle is off. So this is literally unplug it, plug it back in to fix the situation. Yeah,
is that what it is?
And that's what it sounds like. You got to complete it sounds like, yeah, you can turn the vehicle off. You got.
I'm sure. Okay, so there's a software update that's coming. That's the actual remedy for the vehicle problem, and this one's a little bit scary because if the automatic emergency braking system in these vehicles relies on the brake booster to perform the braking operation when the human's not braking. And so functionally, if you have this problem in your vehicle, you're also not going to be driving with automatic emergency braking. So all of you owners who have these vehicles should get this in and have it fixed immediately. And you should be hearing about it in about 2 weeks, August 25th.
All right, next up on the countdown, Jim Farley's favorite auto company, Ford. 56,473 vehicles, the 2025 Ford F-150 Hybrid. And a missing audible seatbelt chime can result in decreased seatbelt usage. People, you don't need a chime to remind you to put on your seatbelt. Just put on your seatbelt. Click it or tick it, as they say.
Yeah, and you know what? Even if you aren't as smart as Anthony and know that you need to put your seatbelt on when you get in the car, I think most of us know that, but there are some people who might not do it if the car doesn't annoy the hell out of them with some type of chime. So for them, we want this recall to occur. And also this is a violation of Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards that requires a warning to owners. And it looks like owners should have already been notified. Actually, no. notification to dealers should have already happened, but owners are going to receive something on the 25th of this month. You could probably go ahead and call your dealer and schedule an appointment.
Yeah. The owners will be notified by a text message. It goes ding, 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 ding. Next up, Kia, 100,000 plus vehicles. The 2023 to 2025 Kia K5. Ooh, due to a supplier quality issue, the C-pillar garnish face plate may progressively delaminate and become loose from the base of the molding. The faceplate may eventually fall off. What?
And this recall and the next recall on the list are both Kia recalls for.
Oh, did you ruin the surprise? I don't know what's next.
Essentially parts falling off the vehicle. You know, we've seen trim detachments and things like this. And one of them, I think this one that was just noted by Anthony, it's a C-pillar garnish face plate. That delaminates, becomes unglued, and gets loose and flies off the vehicle and is a risk to other people on the road and vulnerable road users who might be in the area. All sorts of people who could be hit by this thing flying off your car. The interesting thing about this recall is that I think between the two different recalls that are occurring here, one of them, I think Kia had 12,000 of these failures reported before they even decided to do the recall. So that suggests there was possibly some pressure from NHTSA on that side to make sure they went through with it. That is a lot of failures in a population of 100,000 vehicles. Virtually more than 1 out of every 10 had already failed before they did the recall. That's a very high failure rate. And owners are going to hear about this later in September.
Yeah. If you listen this far, you might have also become unglued. But we only have one recall left from Kia, as Michael ruined the surprise. 201,149 vehicles, the 2023 to 2025 Kia Telluride. And that's it. Insufficient application of the adhesive layer between the door belt molding faceplate and the base of the molding. This is more of just things falling off the car on the inside.
Yep, same thing and similar for owners. You'll expect to hear about this later in September, and you'll get a new. This one is a door belt molding assembly that's going to be replaced, and you're going to get a new adhesive layer to stick it onto your car, and hopefully it won't come off this time.
It's just going to be some bubble gum. And with that, listeners, thank you so much for sticking around. We know this one went long, but, your love for us is... I'll stop. Autosafety.org. Click on donate. Give us 5 stars. Tell all your friends. Like, subscribe, hashtag it, something. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
For more information, visit www.autosafety.org.